A soldier walks into Afghan homes and executes 16 people as they sleep. A psychiatrist opens fire on his own unit, killing 13. A staff sergeant collects human fingers as trophies. These aren't war stories. These are U.S. military members sentenced to life in prison for crimes that shocked the nation. What they did in uniform will leave you speechless. Let's expose them. Number 1 is Robert Bales. Robert Bales was born on June 30, 1973, in Norwood, Ohio. He was the youngest of 5 brothers and attended Norwood High School, where he played football and was named class president. He briefly attended Ohio State University to study economics but left without graduating in 1996. Bales worked as a stockbroker in Columbus, Ohio, but his career ended in scandal. In 2003, an arbitration panel found him liable for financial fraud, ordering him to pay $1.2 million in civil damages. The victim never received a penny. Just 18 months after the case was filed, Bales disappeared. He joined the U.S. Army at age 28, shortly after the September 11th attacks. In 2002, before enlisting, Bales was charged with assaulting his girlfriend and ordered to undergo anger management counseling. The warning signs were already there. By 2012, Robert Bales had completed 3 tours in Iraq and was assigned to Camp Baily in Kandahar province, Afghanistan. On March 10th, while on guard duty, he discussed a promotion he wanted but had been denied. That night, he drank whiskey mixed with diet soda with 2 other soldiers, violating military rules. He watched Man on Fire, a revenge thriller about a murderous rampage. Around midnight, he took sleeping pills. They didn't work. In the early morning hours of March 11, 2012, at approximately 3 a.m., Bales left Camp Baily wearing night vision goggles and traditional Afghan clothing. He walked to the villages of Al-Khozai and Balandi, armed with an M4 carbine and M9 sidearm. He entered homes and shot men, women, and children as they slept. 9 children, some as young as 2 years old. For women, 3 men, 16 people killed, 6 injured. Witnesses said 11 corpses from one family were shot, stabbed, gathered into one room, and set on fire. At least 1 child's body was found partially charred. Bales returned to base once to resupply ammunition. He told a fellow sergeant he had just killed some military-aged males and was going to finish it. The sergeant, half asleep, didn't believe him. Bales left again with grenades and a grenade launcher. When he returned at 4:47 a.m., weapons were pointed at him. He was disarmed and arrested. For 8 hours, Bales alternated between confessing and obstructing the investigation. Afghan villagers brought the bodies to the base. On March 16th, Bales was flown to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and held in solitary confinement. On March 23rd, he was charged with 17 counts of murder, 6 counts of attempted murder, and 6 counts of assault. 1 murder charge was later dropped. His attorney claimed there was no forensic evidence and no confession. Bales said he remembered very little of the night. His defense argued he suffered from PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and had been taking mefloquine, an anti-malaria drug known to cause aggression and psychosis. The prosecution called him a cold-blooded killer who showed no mercy. On June 5, 2013, Bales pleaded guilty to 16 counts of murder and 6 counts of assault to avoid the death penalty. When the judge asked why he killed them, Bales said, "There's not a good reason in this world for why I did the horrible things I did." On August 23, 2013, a military panel sentenced Robert Bales to life in prison without parole. He was dishonorably discharged, demoted, and forfeited all pay. Afghan villagers and victims' families were outraged, saying he deserved death. Bales is incarcerated at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth. In September 2017, the U.S. Army Criminal Appeals Court upheld his conviction. The U.S. Supreme Court refused his appeal. In December 2020, his defense requested a pardon from President Donald Trump. It was denied. As of 2025, Robert Bales remains imprisoned. Robert Bales murdered 16 innocent people, 9 of them children. He walked into their homes and shot them as they slept. He claimed PTSD and medications made him do it. But he chose to drink that night. He chose to arm himself. He chose to walk into those villages. 16 families will never be whole again. Justice was served, but the nightmare never ends. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, you need to do it right now. We're exposing the most shocking military crimes that most people never hear about. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Number 2 is Nidal Malik Hasan. Nidal Malik Hasan was born on September 8, 1970, in Arlington County, Virginia, to Palestinian immigrants. He was raised Muslim and attended Virginia schools, graduating from William Fleming High School in Roanoke in 1988. He enlisted in the U.S. Army that same year and pursued higher education while serving. He earned degrees from Virginia Western Community College and Virginia Tech before attending the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Maryland, where he became a psychiatrist. But his performance was troubling. He was on academic probation for much of his 6 years in medical school. During his residency at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, he made a controversial presentation titled "The Quranic Worldview as it Relates to Muslims in the U.S. Military." He suggested Muslim soldiers should be allowed to leave the military as conscientious objectors and warned that adverse events could include espionage or killing fellow soldiers. Colleagues described his comments as anti-American. Despite concerns about his behavior, Hasan was promoted to major in May 2009. By 2009, Hasan was working as an Army psychiatrist at Fort Hood, Texas, counseling soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. He was deeply opposed to the wars and reportedly told colleagues that Muslims should stand up and fight against American aggression. Between December 2008 and the shooting, Hasan exchanged emails with Anwar al-Awlaki, a radical imam linked to al-Qaeda. The FBI monitored the emails but concluded they were related to his professional research and posed no threat. On November 5, 2009, Hasan was scheduled to deploy to Afghanistan. That morning, he gave away his furniture and distributed copies of the Quran, telling neighbors he was being deployed. At approximately 1:30 p.m., he walked into the Soldier Readiness Processing Center at Fort Hood, where unarmed soldiers were preparing for deployment. Witnesses said he shouted "Allahu Akbar, God is great," and opened fire with an FN-57 pistol. He fired approximately 100 rounds in 10 minutes. 13 people were killed, including 12 soldiers and 1 civilian. An unborn child also died. 32 others were wounded. Among the dead was Lieutenant Colonel Juanita Warman, 55, a nurse who knew she was dying from internal bleeding. Her final words were, "Tell my family I love them." Captain John Gaffney, 54, and Specialist Frederick Green, 29, tried to charge Hasan despite their wounds. Green was shot 12 times. Department of Army Police Officer Kimberly Munley confronted Hasan as he exited the building. They exchanged fire before Munley was shot twice in the leg. Officer Mark Todd shot Hasan multiple times, kicked the pistol from his hand, and handcuffed him. The massacre was over, but the damage was permanent. Hasan survived his wounds but was paralyzed from the waist down. He was hospitalized and later transferred to the Bell County Jail. On November 12, 2009, he was charged with 13 counts of premeditated murder and 32 counts of attempted murder. Investigators uncovered his emails with al-Awlaki and his radical online activity, including posts comparing suicide bombers to soldiers sacrificing themselves for noble causes. During his court-martial in August 2013, Hasan represented himself. He admitted he was the shooter and told the jury he had switched sides and considered himself a mujahideen waging jihad against the U.S. military. He called no witnesses and offered no defense. When asked why he killed them, Hasan said he had no good reason for his actions. On August 23, 2013, the military jury convicted him on all 45 counts. On August 28, 2013, the jury sentenced Nidal Hasan to death. He was stripped of his rank, dishonorably discharged, and forfeited all pay. He is incarcerated at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, on military death row. In September 2017 and again in September 2023, appellate courts upheld his conviction and sentence. On March 31, 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his final appeal. In September 2025, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced he was seeking formal approval from President Donald Trump to carry out Hasan's execution. If executed, he would be the first military execution in 60 years. Nidal Hasan murdered 13 people and wounded 32 others. He claimed he was defending Islam from American aggression. But his victims were unarmed soldiers preparing to serve their country. He wasn't a martyr. He was a mass murderer who betrayed the uniform he wore and the oath he swore. Justice has been served, but the families of the dead will never be whole again. Number 3 is Stephen Dale Green. Stephen Dale Green was born on May 2, 1985. By 2005, he had enlisted in the U.S. Army and was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division. He was deployed to Iraq and stationed at a traffic checkpoint near Yusufia, southwest of Mahmudiyah in Baghdad Governorate. Green's psychological state was deteriorating. In February 2006, 1 month before the massacre, he told the Washington Post, "I came over here because I wanted to kill people. I shot a guy at a traffic checkpoint and it was like nothing. Over here, killing people is like squashing an ant. You kill somebody and it's like, all right, let's go get some pizza." The warning signs were everywhere. No one acted. 14-year-old Abir Qasim Hamza al-Janabi lived with her family 200 meters from Green's checkpoint. Soldiers often watched her doing chores. On one occasion, Green ran his finger down her cheek, terrifying her. Her mother told relatives the soldiers would point at Abir and say, "Very good, very good." The family made plans for Abir to sleep at her uncle's house for safety. On March 12, 2006, Green and 4 other soldiers were at their checkpoint playing cards and drinking whiskey mixed with energy drinks. Green repeatedly suggested they kill some Iraqis and rape Abir. The group decided to go to her home. For soldiers left their posts wearing army-long underwear to look like ninjas. In broad daylight, they entered Abir's home and separated the family into 2 rooms. Green murdered Abir's mother Fakriya, father Qasim, and 6-year-old sister Hadil. He broke her mother's arms during a struggle. Meanwhile, Paul Cortez and James Barker held Abir down and raped her as she screamed in Arabic. When she heard the gunshots that killed her family, she screamed louder. Green emerged saying, "I just killed them. All are dead." He then raped Abir before shooting her multiple times in the head. Barker poured petrol on her body and set her on fire. They burned their bloodied clothes, threw the murder weapon into a canal, and left to celebrate with chicken wings. Green later called the crime awesome. Abir's 9-year-old and 11-year-old brothers were at school and survived. They were orphaned by the massacre. Neighbors saw smoke and found the bodies. Green and his accomplices claimed Sunni insurgents were responsible. The military accepted this without investigation. Green was honorably discharged in May 2006 after being diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. The crime remained hidden until June 2006, when Private Justin Watt learned the truth and reported it despite fearing retaliation. Within days, all 5 soldiers were arrested. Because Green had been discharged, the FBI arrested him as a civilian in North Carolina on June 30, 2006. He was charged with rape and 4 counts of murder. His trial began in April 2009. On May 7, 2009, a federal jury in Kentucky convicted him on all counts. Prosecutors sought the death penalty, but jurors failed to reach unanimous agreement. On September 4, 2009, Green was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Abir's uncle called the sentence a crime, almost worse than the soldier's crime. Cortez received 100 years, Barker 90 years, and Spielman 110 years, all with possibility of parole after 10 years. Brian Howard received 27 months. Anthony Uribe testified against the others and received an other-than-honorable discharge. Watt received death threats but later spoke at West Point about upholding the Army ethic. Green was imprisoned at the United States Penitentiary in Tucson, Arizona. On February 17, 2014, he died from complications following a suicide attempt by hanging. Stephen Dale Green raped and murdered a 14-year-old girl after slaughtering her family. He called it awesome. He said killing people was like squashing an ant. 4 innocent people died because soldiers decided to celebrate their boredom with rape and murder. Akbar's brothers were left orphaned. Justice was served, but a family was erased. Some monsters wear uniforms. Before we continue, make sure you've hit that like button. These stories are disturbing, but they need to be told. Your likes help this video reach more people. If you haven't liked yet, do it right now. Number 4 is Hasan Karim Akbar. Hasan Karim Akbar was born Mark Fidel Cools on April 21, 1971, in Los Angeles, California. His father John converted to Islam while in prison and changed his surname to Akbar. His mother also converted to Islam, married William Bilal, and took the name Quran Bilal. She changed her son's name to Hasan Karim Akbar. He was raised Muslim from a young age. In 1988, Akbar was admitted to the University of California, Davis, to study aeronautical and mechanical engineering. It took him 9 years to graduate in 1997. Deeply in debt, he joined the army as an enlisted member. By March 2003, Akbar was a sergeant and combat engineer assigned to the 326th Engineer Battalion, 101st Airborne Division. His superiors considered his performance substandard. He was demoted from squad leader. Fellow soldiers said he was isolated and was seen talking to himself. Superiors noted he had an attitude problem. By March 2003, Akbar's unit was staging at Camp Pennsylvania in Kuwait, preparing for the invasion of Iraq. Akbar was recently reprimanded for insubordination and told he would not join his unit's push into Iraq. In his diary on February 4, 2003, he wrote, "I suppose they want to punk me or just humiliate me. I am not going to do anything about it as long as I stay here. But as soon as I am in Iraq, I am going to try and kill as many of them as possible." In another entry, he wrote, "I may not have killed any Muslims, but being in the army is the same thing. I may have to make a choice very soon on who to kill." In the early morning hours of March 23, 2003, Akbar turned off a power generator that lit the area. Then he threw 4 M67 fragmentation hand grenades into 3 tents where members of the 101st Airborne Division were sleeping. In the chaos, he fired his M4 rifle at fleeing soldiers. Army Captain Christopher Seifert, 27, was fatally shot in the back. Air Force Major Gregory Stone, 40, was killed by grenade shrapnel. 83 wounds covered his body. 14 other soldiers were wounded. After his arrest, Akbar reportedly told officers, "You guys are coming into our countries, and you're going to rape our women and kill our children." Akbar was arrested immediately after the attack. He confessed to the crimes. In 2005, he was tried by court-martial at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, before a military jury of 9 officers and 6 senior non-commissioned officers. His defense attorneys argued he had psychiatric problems diagnosed at age 14, including paranoia, irrational behavior, and insomnia. His father claimed Akbar had complained about religious and racial harassment, though no witnesses were produced at trial. The prosecution called him a hate-filled, ideologically driven murderer. Prosecutors cited his diary entries and the fact that he stole grenades and turned off the generator as proof of premeditation. During his trial, Akbar smuggled a sharp object from a conference room. When a military police officer removed his handcuffs, Akbar stabbed the officer in the shoulder and neck before being wrestled to the ground. On April 21, 2005, Akbar was found guilty of 2 counts of premeditated murder and 3 counts of attempted premeditated murder. On April 28, 2005, the jury sentenced him to death. Lieutenant General John Vines affirmed the death sentence on November 20, 2006. The Army Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the sentence on July 13, 2012. The United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces affirmed the decision on August 19, 2015. The U.S. Supreme Court denied his final appeal on October 3, 2016. Akbar is confined at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, awaiting execution. The President of the United States must authorize the execution. As of 2025, Akbar remains on military death row. Hasan Akbar murdered 2 fellow soldiers and wounded 14 others because he believed the U.S. military was attacking Muslims. He wrote in his diary that he wanted to kill as many of them as possible. He sits on death row, the first soldier convicted of fragging since Vietnam. 2 families lost loved ones. 14 soldiers carry scars. Was he a victim of harassment or a terrorist in uniform? Number 5 is William J. Kreutzer Jr. William J. Kreutzer Jr. was born in 1969 in Clinton, Maryland. His father was a police officer. His mother worked for Prince George's county government. From an early age, Kreutzer displayed a fascination with military history, visiting Civil War battlefields and delivering informal lectures. He dreamed of becoming a soldier. In February 1992, Kreutzer enlisted in the U.S. Army. By March 1993, he was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He was promoted to sergeant in March 1995. But his career was troubled. Fellow soldiers nicknamed him Crazy Kreutzer and targeted him with practical jokes and teasing. In June 1994, while deployed to the Sinai, he broke down in tears on guard duty and spoke of killing several soldiers. He was sent to a social worker who diagnosed him with low self-esteem and anger issues. He was disallowed weapons for 2 weeks but deemed not a threat. On October 26, 1995, the day before the attack, Kreutzer told his former roommate, "It's not going to be all right." That evening, he called another soldier and said he would be opening fire on the calisthenics field the next morning. The soldier reported this to superiors. They dismissed the claim, calling Kreutzer a pussy. They allowed the soldier to check Kreutzer's room, where he found Kreutzer's will. No action was taken. Early on October 27, 1995, at approximately 5:15 a.m., Kreutzer concealed himself in a foxhole-like position near Tall Stadium at Fort Bragg. He waited for the morning fog to lift. Approximately 1,300 members of the 82nd Airborne Division assembled in formation for morning physical training. Kreutzer was armed with a Ruger Mini 14 rifle, a pistol, and over 400 rounds of ammunition. He opened fire. He fired approximately 30 rounds into the formation. Major Stephen Badger, 37, the brigade's intelligence officer, was fatally shot in the head. 18 other soldiers were wounded. Chief Warrant Officer Abraham Castillo was shot in the neck and paralyzed. Major Guy Lofaro was shot in the stomach, suffering severe internal damage. Several Special Forces soldiers rushed toward the gunfire. As Kreutzer fled into the woods, they tackled him and disarmed him. He was taken into custody by military police. After his arrest, Kreutzer asked to speak with the social worker who had evaluated him in 1994. That social worker had been reassigned. A psychiatrist was provided instead. Kreutzer seemed delusional and severely distraught. The following day, another psychiatrist declared there were definite mental health issues involved. On December 8, 1995, military doctors deemed Kreutzer mentally fit to stand trial. In 1996, Kreutzer was tried by court-martial at Fort Bragg. During the trial, he claimed, "I wanted to send a message to the chain of command that had forgotten the welfare of the common soldier." He was convicted of premeditated murder and 18 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to death. In 2005, the Army Court of Criminal Appeals commuted his death sentence, citing that his lawyer had not properly informed the courts of his mental illnesses. On March 10, 2009, Kreutzer repleaded guilty to 1 count of premeditated murder, 17 counts of attempted premeditated murder, and charges of violating regulations. On March 24, 2009, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was reduced in rank, forfeited all pay, and received a dishonorable discharge. In an unsworn statement, Kreutzer said, "I offer my most heartfelt, sincere apology. Words are inadequate to express the deep sense of shame and remorse that I feel." As of 2025, William Kreutzer Jr. remains incarcerated at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. William Kreutzer Jr. murdered 1 fellow soldier and wounded 18 others because he believed his chain of command had forgotten the common soldier. He warned someone the night before. His superiors dismissed it. 1 man died. 18 were wounded. 1 was paralyzed for life. Was he a victim of a broken system or a cold-blooded killer who betrayed his brothers? We're halfway through this list, and it only gets darker from here. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss an upload. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Number 6 is Dwight Jeffrey Loving. Dwight Jeffrey Loving was born around 1968 in Rochester, New York. Little is publicly known about his childhood or family life, but by the late 1980s, he had enlisted in the U.S. Army. He was assigned to Fort Hood, Texas, as an Army private first class. To those around him, he appeared to be an ordinary soldier. But beneath the surface, something darker was taking shape. By December 1988, Loving was about to commit a series of crimes that would leave 2 men dead and a community shaken. On the night of December 11, 1988, Loving robbed 2 convenience stores in Killeen, Texas. He netted less than $100. It wasn't enough. He decided to rob taxi drivers instead. On December 12th, at approximately 8 p.m., Loving called for a cab. The driver who arrived was Private Christopher Fay, 20 years old, an active-duty soldier working part-time to earn extra money. Fay drove Loving from Killeen to a secluded area of Fort Hood. Loving pulled a gun and robbed him. After taking Fay's money, Loving shot him in the back of the head. He watched blood gushing from the wound. Then he shot Fay in the back of the head a second time. Fay's body was discovered by another soldier a short while later. Loving fled to his barracks. At 8:15 p.m. that same evening, he called for another cab. The driver who arrived was Bobby Sharbino, 44, a retired Army sergeant also working part-time. Sharbino drove Loving from Fort Hood to a secluded street in Killeen. Loving robbed him at gunpoint, ordered him to lie down on the seat, and shot him in the head. Sharbino died instantly. After the second murder, Loving went to local nightclubs with his girlfriend and friends. He socialized. He danced. He acted as if nothing had happened. Later that evening, he called for a third cab. The driver was Howard Harrison. Loving attempted to rob and murder him, but Harrison successfully defended himself. Loving escaped on foot. In his later videotaped confession, Loving admitted he killed his first victim to see if he could get away with it, and killed his second victim for fun. The next day, December 13, 1988, a joint task force composed of FBI agents, Texas Rangers, and the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division launched a manhunt. Army special agents arrested Loving and videotaped his confession. He reviewed the tape and signed a transcript. He did not deny what he had done. He confessed to robbing 2 convenience stores, murdering Christopher Fay and Bobby Sharbino, and attempting to murder Howard Harrison. In March 1989, Loving was tried by court-martial at Fort Hood. On April 3, 1989, he was found guilty of 2 counts of premeditated murder, attempted murder, and 5 counts of robbery. He was sentenced to death. Loving spent over 25 years on military death row at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He appealed his sentence multiple times. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of his death sentence in 1996 and denied another appeal in 2001. His legal team filed a clemency petition citing issues of racial bias, ineffective counsel, and unlawful command influence. On January 17, 2017, 3 days before leaving office, President Barack Obama commuted Loving's death sentence to life imprisonment without parole. As of 2025, Dwight Loving remains incarcerated at Fort Leavenworth. Dwight Loving murdered 2 men for less than $100 and the thrill of killing. He shot Christopher Fay twice in the head and watched him bleed. He killed Bobby Sharbino and went dancing. He tried to kill a third man who fought back. 2 families lost loved ones. A community lost its sense of safety. Justice was served, but the scars remain. Number 7 is Timothy Baily Hennis. Timothy Baily Hennis was born on February 24, 1958, in Rochester, Minnesota. His father, Robert, was a manager at IBM Rochester during the 1970s. Hennis graduated from Mayo High School in 1976 and worked in Rochester until he joined the United States Army in 1980. By 1985, he was married to Angela, and they had a young daughter. Hennis worked as a parachute rigger at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. To those around him, he appeared to be an ordinary soldier and family man. But on May 12, 1985, A horrific crime would forever link his name to one of the most complex murder cases in American legal history. On May 7, 1985, Hennis responded to a classified ad for an English setter named Dixie. The ad had been placed by Catherine Katie Eastburn, whose husband Gary, an Air Force captain, was away for training in Alabama. Katie lived with their 3 daughters, Kara, 5, Erin, 3, and Jana, 22 months. Hennis visited the Eastburn home, chatted with Katie, and took Dixie home for his family. On May 11th, Gary Eastburn could not reach his wife by phone. On May 12th, a concerned neighbor and a police officer entered the home. What they found was unspeakable. Katie had been stripped to the waist, raped, and stabbed 15 times. Semen was found inside her body. Kara had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest. Erin had been bludgeoned in the chest and back. The youngest child, Jana, survived the attack but was dehydrated and suffering from diarrhea. Investigators determined the murders occurred between 8 p.m. on May 9th and 3 a.m. on May 10th. A janitor named Patrick Cohn told detectives he had seen a tall white man dressed in jeans, a knit cap, and a black members-only jacket leaving the Eastburn's driveway carrying a garbage bag in the early morning hours of May 10th. The man drove away in a white Chevrolet Chevette. Following media coverage, Hennis visited the police station on May 15th. He acknowledged picking up the dog on May 7th but claimed no other contact with Katie except a phone call on May 9th. He provided blood, saliva, hair samples, and fingerprints. Because he closely resembled the composite sketch, Hennis became the prime suspect. Cohn identified Hennis during a photo lineup. Hennis was arrested that evening. Investigators discovered Katie's stolen ATM card had been used twice, totaling $300. Hennis had been late on his rent and had prior convictions for writing bad checks. A female witness at the ATM identified a blonde man matching Hennis's description. Hennis had brought a black members-only jacket to the dry cleaner on May 10th. Neighbors said he burned items in a barrel on May 11th. In his first trial in July 1986, Hennis was convicted and sentenced to death. In 1988, the North Carolina Supreme Court overturned his conviction, ruling the prosecution had used excessive graphic photographs that prejudiced the jury. In his second trial in April 1989, Hennis was acquitted of all charges. After his acquittal, Hennis re-enlisted in the Army and served in Iraq and Somalia. He retired as a master sergeant in 2004. In 2006, a cold case detective tested semen from Katie's body using DNA technology unavailable in the 1980s. The DNA matched Hennis. The Army recalled him to active duty in September 2006 and court-martialed him at Fort Bragg. Despite double jeopardy protections, the dual sovereignty doctrine allowed military prosecution. On April 3, 2010, Hennis was convicted of 3 counts of premeditated murder and sentenced to death. He was demoted to Private E1, stripped of all pay, and dishonorably discharged. His appeals to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces and the U.S. Supreme Court were denied. As of 2025, Timothy Hennis remains on military death row at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Timothy Hennis was tried 3 times for the same crime. Convicted, acquitted, convicted again. DNA evidence linked him to the rape and murder of Katie Eastburn and the brutal deaths of her 2 young daughters. He served 20 years in the Army after his acquittal, awarded for his service. Then science caught up with him. 3 trials, 2 death sentences, 1 man. Justice was served, but it took 25 years. Make sure you've liked this video if you're still watching. These cases are shocking, and your support helps us keep bringing them to light. If you haven't hit that like button yet, do it right now. Number 8 is Calvin Gibbs. Calvin Gibbs was born in 1985 in Billings, Montana. Little is publicly known about his early childhood or family life, but by his mid-20s, he had enlisted in the United States Army. He served in the Iraq War before being deployed to Afghanistan in 2010 as a staff sergeant with the 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Infantry Regiment, 5th Stryker Brigade. He was stationed at FOB Ramrod in Maywand, Kandahar Province. Gibbs was the highest-ranking soldier in his platoon and carried himself with confidence. But according to testimony from fellow soldiers, when Gibbs joined the platoon in early 2010, he began describing scenarios to kill civilians, saying it would be easy to get away with. He bragged about his exploits in Iraq, telling stories about how easily one could toss a grenade at someone and kill them. The warning signs were there. Between January and May 2010, Calvin Gibbs led what prosecutors called a kill team, a group of soldiers who murdered at least 3 unarmed Afghan civilians for sport. On January 15, 2010, in the village of La Muhammad Kalai, 15-year-old Gul Mudin was doing farm work for his father. Under Gibbs's direction, Specialist Jeremy Morlock and Private First Class Andrew Holmes threw a fragmentation grenade at Mudin and shot him with a machine gun and assault rifle. The soldiers stripped the boy, took photos with his body, and cut off his little finger. They left him half-naked on the ground. On February 22nd, using thermal imagery, the soldiers discovered Marak Aga curled in a ball by a roadside. The army later determined Marak was deaf or mentally disabled. The soldiers killed him and kept part of his skull as a trophy. On May 2nd, Gibbs, Morlock, and Specialist Adam Winfield attacked and killed Mullah Adadad with a grenade and gunfire in front of his wife and children. Gibbs amputated the man's finger and kept it. After each killing, the soldiers planted weapons on the victims to make them appear to be Taliban fighters. Gibbs used medical shears to sever fingers that he kept as trophies. He gave one to Holmes, who kept it dried in a Ziploc bag. The soldiers took photos posing with the bodies, smiling and lifting corpses by the hair. Gibbs later said he kept the fingers because he was disassociated during combat, comparing it to keeping the antlers off a deer you'd shoot. The investigation began after Private First Class Justin Stoner reported widespread hashish use in the platoon and an assault on him for threatening to report the drug use. The subsequent investigation uncovered the murders. Specialist Adam Winfield told his father after the first killing. His father called the Army Inspector General's hotline, Senator Bill Nelson's office, and Fort Lewis, but nothing changed. 5 soldiers faced murder charges. Morlock pleaded guilty to 3 counts of premeditated murder and received 24 years in exchange for testifying against Gibbs. Holmes pleaded guilty to unpremeditated murder and received 7 years. Winfield pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and received 3 years. All testified against Gibbs. Prosecutors told the jury Gibbs was found in possession of finger bones, leg bones, and a tooth taken from Afghan corpses. Gibbs took the stand in his own defense, denying he planned or killed any non-combatants. He claimed he was returning enemy fire in November 2011. After 4 hours of deliberation, a military jury convicted Calvin Gibbs on 15 counts, including 3 counts of premeditated murder, conspiracy, and illegally cutting off pieces of corpses. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 9 years. He was reduced in rank to private, ordered to forfeit all pay and allowances, and dishonorably discharged. Gibbs expressed regret for keeping body parts but not for the killings, claiming all were justified. As of 2025, Calvin Gibbs is serving his life sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Calvin Gibbs led a kill team that murdered 3 unarmed Afghan civilians for sport. A 15-year-old boy, a deaf man, a cleric in front of his family. Gibbs kept their fingers as trophies, comparing it to hunting deer. He claimed he was returning fire. The evidence said otherwise. 3 families lost loved ones. Justice was served, but the scars remain. Number 9 is John M. Russell. John M. Russell was born in 1965 in Sherman, Texas. By 2009, he was a 44-year-old Army sergeant serving his 3rd tour of duty in Iraq as a communications NCO with the 54th Engineer Battalion. Russell had been diagnosed with depression and dyslexia. According to fellow soldiers, he was quiet and skilled with traditional radio devices but struggled with new computer systems. His inability to learn new skills degraded his performance and his relationship with peers. Over time, Russell became increasingly distant and visibly disturbed. In the days before the killings, witnesses said he became withdrawn and started having suicidal thoughts. He had visited the Camp Liberty Combat Stress Clinic 3 times before May 11, 2009. On that day, he went for a 4th appointment. On May 11, 2009, at noon, Russell arrived at the Camp Liberty Combat Stress Center in Baghdad for an appointment. There was a heated argument between Russell and clinic personnel. Russell had been trying to secure a mental disability retirement to salvage his benefits after fearing a sexual harassment complaint could derail his career. The day before, psychiatrist Lieutenant Colonel Michael Jones told Russell that such a retirement would require some kind of suicidal psychotic crisis. When Russell saw Jones again on May 11th, the psychiatrist told him he had no intention of giving him a golden ticket out of the army. Russell told Jones that the doctor either had to help him or he would kill himself. Jones's dismissive response was, "You're fixed." As Russell stormed out, Jones yelled, "Soldier, you've made your decision." Russell was being escorted back to his unit at Camp Stryker when he seized an unsecured M16 rifle from his escort. He drove back to the clinic. At 1:41 p.m., military police at Camp Liberty received a report that shots had been fired. Russell methodically made his way through the small wood-frame clinic. The chief psychiatrist, Major Matthew Houseal, 54, was the first to be shot through a window in the head. Navy Commander Keith Springle, 52, who had briefly treated Russell days before, was shot in the torso. Russell entered the room and shot him again in the back of the head. Sergeant Christian Bueno Galdos, 25, was shot in the flank and screamed, "Oh God! Oh God!" as Russell moved in and shot him in the eye. Specialist Jacob Barton, 20, and Private First Class Michael Yates, 19, were also killed. Lieutenant Colonel Jones escaped by jumping out a window. 5 unarmed service members were dead. Russell was arrested immediately after the shooting. He was charged with 5 counts of murder and 1 count of aggravated assault. In May 2012, prosecutors decided to seek the death penalty, overruling a pre-trial recommendation that Russell's mental illness made capital punishment inappropriate. His defense attorney, James Culp, pursued an insanity defense, alleging the treatment Russell received was mental health mistreatment and a significant causal factor in the massacre. Defense attorneys presented testimony from forensic psychiatrists and the Army's Mental Health Board, which found Russell suffered from severe depression with psychotic features, post-combat stress, and brain damage affecting impulse control. In 2013, Russell pleaded guilty to 5 counts of unpremeditated murder to avoid the death penalty. He told the court he did it out of rage. The plea deal stipulated that prosecutors could argue the murders were premeditated. On May 16, 2013, after a week of testimony, Judge Colonel David Kahn ruled that Russell killed with premeditation. Russell was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was reduced in rank to private and dishonorably discharged from the Army. His attorneys argued Russell suffered from PTSD, depression, and brain injury from previous combat, making him not fully responsible. But prosecutors argued Russell had been trying to paint himself as mentally ill to win early retirement and struck back in the language of revenge. As of 2025, John Russell is serving his life sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. John Russell murdered 5 unarmed service members at a combat stress clinic. He claimed he did it out of rage and despair. The Army said it was premeditated revenge. He wanted help. Instead, he was dismissed. 5 families lost loved ones. The question remains, was Russell a broken soldier failed by the system, or a calculated killer? Justice was served, but the tragedy exposes the cost of repeated deployments and untreated trauma. Number 10 is Ronald Adrin Gray. Ronald Adrin Gray was born on August 14, 1965, in Cochran, Georgia, but grew up in Liberty City, a public housing project in Miami. Little is publicly known about his early childhood, but his mother Lizzie Hurd and sister later testified that he suffered substantial abuse from his stepfather. Gray grew up in extreme poverty. The electricity was often shut off because bills couldn't be paid. His stepfather beat him with belts until he bled. The warning signs were there from the beginning. At age 18 in 1984, Gray enlisted in the United States Army. He was assigned to the Target Acquisition Battery, 1 to 39 Field Artillery Battalion. By 1986, he was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, holding the rank of Specialist 4E4, and working as a cook assigned to 3rd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division. To those around him, he appeared to be an ordinary soldier. But beneath the surface, Gray was a predator waiting to strike. Between April 1986 and January 1987, Ronald Gray embarked on a 9-month reign of terror that left 4 women dead and 1 clinging to life. On April 27, 1986, Gray murdered his first victim, Linda Jean Coates, a 23-year-old student at nearby Campbell University. The details of her death were so brutal that investigators knew they were dealing with a monster. On December 11, 1986, Gray abducted, raped, and murdered 18-year-old Tammy Kofor Wilson. Her body told the story of unimaginable suffering. 4 days later, on December 15th, Gray abducted Private Laura Lee Vickery-Clay, an 18-year-old soldier stationed at Fort Bragg. 2 witnesses saw her at a local Kmart with a man later identified as Gray. The next morning, her car was found a block from her home. It appeared to have been driven through the woods. The driver's seat was set farther back than necessary for Vickery-Clay to drive. 3 of Gray's fingerprints were found on the hood. On January 17, 1987, a soldier discovered Vickery-Clay's half-naked and decomposed body in the woods near Fort Bragg. She had been raped, sodomized, and shot in the neck, forehead, chest, and back. She had suffered blunt force trauma to various parts of her body. The murder weapon was a .22 caliber pistol that Gray had stolen in November 1986. It was found 60 feet from her body. On January 3, 1987, Gray entered the barracks room of 19-year-old Private Marion Lang Namath under the pretense of notifying her about a party. Once inside, he grabbed her, held a knife to her throat, and asked for her military field gear. He tied her hands behind her back, removed her underclothing, and raped her. Then he stabbed her repeatedly in the neck and on the side of her body, threatening to return and kill her if she screamed. Namath suffered a lacerated trachea and a collapsed lung, but she survived. 3 days later, on January 6th, 23-year-old Kimberly Ann Ruggles, a local cab driver, was dispatched to Gray's address to pick up a passenger named Ron. In the early morning of January 7th, military police on routine patrol discovered Ruggles' empty cab parked at the edge of the woods. Her nude body was discovered a short distance away. She had been raped, sodomized, stabbed 7 times, and beaten. Ruggles' mouth had been gagged with a cloth belt that matched a pair of black karate pants found in Gray's possession hours earlier. Gray's fingerprints were on the interior door handle of Ruggles' taxi. Ruggles' fingerprints were found on money in Gray's possession. His footprints were at the crime scene. When Namath saw Gray's photograph in the news following his arrest, she immediately identified him as her assailant. The evidence was overwhelming. Gray had left a trail of fingerprints, footprints, and DNA. He couldn't hide anymore. In November 1987, Gray pleaded guilty in Cumberland County Superior Court to 22 felonies, including 2 counts of second-degree murder, 5 counts of first-degree rape, and 3 counts of second-degree kidnapping. He was sentenced to 8 life sentences, including 3 to be served consecutively. But the military wasn't finished with him. A military court also tried Gray. The general court-martial lasted from December 1987 until April 1988. Gray was convicted of 12 charges, including the premeditated murders of Ruggles and Vickery-Clay, the attempted premeditated murder of Namath, 3 rapes, 2 robberies, and 2 counts of forcible sodomy. On April 12, 1988, he was unanimously sentenced to death. He was dishonorably discharged, ordered to forfeit all pay, and reduced in rank to Private E1. Gray was 22 years old. Ronald Gray spent decades filing appeals. On July 28, 2008, President George W. Bush approved Gray's execution, making him the first service member sentenced to death since 1961. Army Secretary Pete Jaron set the execution date as December 10, 2008, ordering that Gray be put to death by lethal injection at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. But on November 26, 2008, a federal judge issued a stay of execution. The case dragged on. In January 2012, the Army Court of Criminal Appeals denied relief. In November 2017, the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces denied his appeal. In June 2018, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear his case, AS of 2025. Ronald Adrin Gray remains on military death row at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He is the longest-serving death row inmate in U.S. military history, having been on death row for over 37 years. Ronald Gray raped and murdered 4 women and attempted to murder a 5th. He abducted an 18-year-old soldier, raped her, sodomized her, and shot her multiple times. He stabbed another soldier repeatedly in the neck and threatened to come back and kill her. He gagged a cab driver with his own belt before raping and stabbing her to death. Gray spent 9 months hunting women like prey, for families lost loved ones. One survivor carries scars forever. Justice was served, but Gray sits on death row, still breathing, while his victims have been gone for nearly 40 years. 10 U.S. military members point 10 horrific crimes. Some wore the uniform with honor before they destroyed it. Others never deserved it in the first place. These cases force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Evil doesn't disappear just because someone takes an oath to defend their country. If this video shocked you, opened your eyes, or made you think differently about military justice, hit that like button right now. And if you haven't subscribed, you absolutely need to. We're exposing the darkest true crime cases from every corner of society. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below. Which case shocked you the most? And do you think military justice is tougher or more lenient than civilian courts? Thanks for watching. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. Because sometimes the monsters aren't just out there. They're wearing our nation's uniform. See you in the next one.